Hello again, YouTubers. Welcome to my very first video that is filmed in pitch darkness, which is something that I've never done in the past. So it's the 28th of September, year 2025, both at Australian Eastern Standard Time / Sydney time and local East Asia coastal time. So yeah, I was just watching, the last samurai, and a lot of thoughts came to my mind, about life and death, and in particular, the morality of euthanasia and blah blah blah. So I just like to talk, briefly talk about and reflect upon them, lest the trail goes cold, and in other words, lest I let them slip, lest I lost track of them. Yeah, so well, for some of you guys who have watched the whole film, I guess most likely you will know that currently, at least physically speaking, we don't tend to encounter a life or death situation, physically speaking, as often as those poor humans did in the past, even in the not so not so so far past. I know exactly what word I was about to say, but I just can't spit it out. So I would just use some synonyms, lest you guys have to endure the agonizing stuttering of mine. So yeah, I'll just try to make this filming session brief. Yeah, so there's a scene that particularly moved me or touched me. It such scene touched pretty much the innermost core of my soul and mind or heart. When I see the Nathan, Captain Nathan, fought for his life until the very end. Not near, not at nearing the ending of the film, but somewhere roughly at the the fifth or the finishing point of the whole film, somewhere in between, those, you know, yeah, somewhere in between those timelines, yeah. So I was just, thinking about, the morality of suicide and morality of euthanasia. So essentially speaking, we pretty much all face, the choice between life and death. And well, at least, for people like me, I suppose, I pretty much face such a choice on a day-to-day day-to-day basis. I beg your pardon. So yeah, so essentially, if why the reason why I am still in one piece and alive, yes, I admit, it is largely, it's due in large part, to, more or less, to my fear, to the fear of, pain and the unknown associated with, with with my non-existence that can possibly come after I commit the act of self offing myself, blah blah blah. you know I I just begin to wonder, the how how um how does these say two types of two types of of death vary? How are they, how do they how they differ from one another? Say you live to the end, you endure to the end of your life, like as an old man, or you died an old man or an old woman, in whichever the case. I suppose maybe the bottom line is that you kind of, yes, of course, you get to experience all the pros and cons of your whole life, once you did once you done your best to endure to the end, and then and not miss a damn thing, say, both good and bad, both moments of joy and moments of extremely excruciating agony and afflictions, blah blah blah. Just I suppose it is quite intriguing, to consider which one, which death holds more weight, I suppose, or makes more impact and you know, if not you know, leads to more honor or a glory. Though I'm not, you know, trying to glorify or glamorify or romanticize such suffering or afflictions. But yeah, it's just that how should I put it? You know, it's just um, say, you know, if you choose, you know, to end your life prematurely, say, um, well, especially, you know, as a man, you know, you pretty much, you know, makes your death makes no impact and has no honor at all. And well, though yes, there is a, you know, sort of a and honorable death. You know, say you sacrifice your life, you know, to save your comrades or comrades, you know, in a battlefield, you know, um, in wars, you know, and you die. I can maybe, you know, we can say, you know, that such death occurs with honor and makes some impact, you know, or at least more impact, you know, than you know than a death due to suicide. That sort of thing. And on the other hand, you know, I suppose, you know, we all more or less, you know, face the choice as to whether, you know, like I said, you know, in the pretty much in the very beginning of this filming session, you know, we pretty much, you know, all more or less have to choose, you know, whether, you know, we voluntarily, you know, of ourselves or continue, you know, to live, to, you know, to cope with this, you know, with this um with this hostile and unforgiving life, you know, for as long as we can, by making some compromises, you know, with, you know, the reality, you know, that we unfortunately all have, you know, more or less have to cope with. But, you know, say, but, you know, in, well, I guess, you know, the, well, I won't say, you know, the exceptions are those that, you know, kind of, you know, are living a lavish or extravagant life, say a princess, you know, a noble or someone, you know, from the royalties, say Prince Williams, or say or a prince or princess, um a prince or a princess charming or blah blah blah, you know, say I beg your pardon, but yeah, but you know, in any case, yeah, they or at least, you know, they get, you know, they have, you know, more effective copes, you know, to deal with this harsh and hostile reality. But that's pretty much um, that's um, you know, off the, you know, the point. You know, I, you know, getting a sidetracked, but yeah. So I guess, you know, I suppose, you know, that, you know, leads to my conclusion, you know, of, you know, my, you know, I won't say, you know, it's new findings or whatnot, but you know, say, during life or death situations or circumstances, you pretty much, have to, fight your way, or, fight your way to the death in order to live. That's unfortunately, a sad part of this current reality. Yes, even if we don't get to experience or go head to head and toe to toe with 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 a life or a death situation as often as humans did in the past. You know, in wars, in great tribulations like famines, like massacres, blah blah blah. Yeah. So it's just unfortunate, that we are brought, to this reality against our will, against our consent, and it pretty much either life or the reality or God leaves us no choice, no third option. Even if say you choose to cope, to cope heavily, to cope in a hardcore fashion until the end, say by ingesting, say, hardcore and illicit drugs like like meth, like blah blah blah, whatnot. It is still it still pretty much counts as the first option, or I should say option A, which is to continue to kind of um gaslight or indoctrinate yourself into believing that you still have a bit of hope that your life sooner or later could improve or recover from rock from rock um from rock abyss. I beg your pardon, but yeah, it's so frustrating, to meet um those blocks that block me from spitting out the words, the expressions I so much want to. But yeah, it's just unfortunate and saddening, you know. Um, I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Um, Tomorrow, aka this coming Monday, aka the 29th of September in 2025. Let's see if I can manage to breach the darkness and make some noticeable physical breakthroughs. Yeah, in any regards, yeah, I will at least give it a try, see how it goes. I pretty much in other words, I pretty much have to kind of die trying. That says fight to the death instead of actually committing suicide. But I suppose, at least, when you fight to the death, you die with a bit of honor and impact, and probably, the adrenaline can alleviate the physical pain, at least during the whole process. Well, theoretically speaking, at least, yeah. So, yeah, in any regards, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your likes and heartwarming comments and kind patronage thus far. And yeah, again, if God's still willing, see you around on YouTube. Buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee. D.com. So yeah, stay out of trouble and stay far from weak. Bye. Cheers.